And some of them are light bulbs, some of them are switches, some of them are sensors, some of them are actually Logitech Harmony activities that I use to trigger other things. And so there's a whole bunch of different things here. This is where all of those devices are stored. And then once you have those devices, you can open up, let's say, the basement heater, for example. It takes you to this page, which is the page that's kind of dedicated to this device. So you'll see here, there's a configure button and off on button, so I can control the off and on state from here. I can refresh it to see whether the state is actually accurate or not. There are a bunch of preferences here. I don't generally go through and go through all of these. Every once in a while, there's a weird thing that happens. I have to go in and manually shut them off if I don't have a dashboard built. But this is where I go to do that. The other thing that's really handy under the device list is at the very bottom. You'll see that this right here, in use by. These are all of the rules that are associated with this specific device. So if this specific device is in a rule, it will be here. So you can see that it's part of the Amazon Echo app. It's part of the Google Home app. It's part of this goodbye rule, this goodnight rule, and this master pre-bed TV rule. So that's really neat when you're trying to troubleshoot things and things aren't working. That's really handy. The other thing that's really handy is this events tab up here. And if you click on the events tab, what it does, it takes you to the log. And the cool thing about the log is the log, if you don't touch anything, it will continue to run live. I'm sorry, this one is just the other log I'm talking about is different. Sorry, forget I said that. So this is just a list of the time that the heater was turned on and off, because that's all this can do is there's an on state and an off state. So you'll see that, like for example, here is the last time it was turned on. It was March 5th at 12:11 Eastern time. And before that, it was turned off at 9:27 p.m. Eastern time. So it keeps a log of all of this, which is handy when things are doing things that you don't expect. Having this log, and there's another log that's even cooler that I'll show you in a little bit, that helps tremendously when trying to troubleshoot your rules and trying to figure things out. So the devices tab is where all of these devices are stored. So everything from my light bulbs, from my switches to everything, okay, is all here. Now, in order to start controlling these things, I need to go through and build rules for them. And the rules are inside of the apps, okay? So I'll load up the apps page, and you'll see that there's a whole bunch of different options inside of here, okay? So here's the Amazon Echo app. Basically what this is this is built into Habitat. It has the ability to choose your devices that you want to be able to communicate with the Amazon Echo, okay? Google Home is a little bit similar. It's just basically a login, and then all of your devices are then available to your Google Home, okay? Groups and scenes, this is where I go to group lights together. So for example, in my bedroom, for example, I have 3 separate light bulbs. So what I've done is I've built in this master bedroom. It groups those 3 light bulbs into one group called master bedroom. The lights are named individually, and then the group is called master bedroom. I also have, there are scenes in here. So if you see, look over here, there's scenes and then there's groups. So scenes are specifically, most specifically for the colored lights that I have, my Philips Hue lights. So for example, where is one of them? MBTV light. So this is a colored hue light strip that goes around my television, and this tells it what color to change that at a certain time. So I can just bring up this scene, and it will then spit that information out. Dashboards I'm going to show you separately. They're really kind of cool. One of the downsides that some people say about Habitat is that there's no native application for Habitat. It's all web-based, which means that you don't have that fancy dashboard type thing that you do have in Smartthings where you can control your devices. The cool thing is that you can build your own and you can customize it however you want. And I'll show you how I've built mine out. And these are all of my dashboards. I actually have several of them. I have a main, and then for each room that I have, I have different dashboards as well. Simple lighting is one that I've just kind of been playing around with. You can do this with what I'm going to show you in a little bit, which is the rule manager. But we'll get to that. This is called simple lighting. It's basically a simpler version of the rule machine that's lower on. And I was just using this to test it out when I first got Habitat. I'm eventually going to move these over into rule machine. Down here, this is the Philips Hue bridge integration. Excuse me. This is what integrates the Philips Hue bridge so that those Hue light bulbs can be communicated to by Habitat. IFTTT integration. If you're using IFTTT, there are a few things that are not native to Habitat that I use IFTTT for. For example, I have my Ring doorbell outside. There is no Ring doorbell app native to Habitat. So what I've done is if my Ring doorbell senses motion, it then contacts Habitat, and Habitat will then flick the light on outside so that when there's motion sensed, that light still goes on. Life 360 connector, because there's no app for Habitat at the moment, the only way to get presence, or one of the ways to get presence, I'm sure there are other ways, but I found the easiest way to do that was with this Life 360 connector. So Life 360 is an app for your smartphones. I believe it's Android and iPhone. And those, what it does is it basically tracks your movement, and it will then communicate that information back to Habitat so that you can tell Habitat when you're home and when you're away. And I'll show you some of those rules that I've created and how that works. Logitech Harmony. So I have two Logitech Harmony remotes, one in my bedroom and one in my living room. And this is what connects those two to the Habitat. Very simple. Mode Manager. Mode Manager is something that is so cool. I love modes. Modes are so flexible, and they can really open up different options for you. When I was using Wink, modes were kind of there, but not really. Once I moved into Smartthings, the modes really started to open up different options for me. And I'll talk a little bit more about modes when we get to the modes section. Motion lighting apps. These are basically, again, this is kind of a thing that can be built into the rule machine as well. But as I was starting out with Habitat, I used the motion lighting apps because it was a little bit easier to set them up and a little bit faster to set them up. So the motion lighting apps are there. Eventually, they'll be moved into the rule machine. The Nest integration. This is something that's kind of sad, but Google is closing down their API soon, which means that if you have the Nest integration installed, you're set. However, if you ever get to a point where you accidentally uninstall it or have to reboot or reinitialize your hub and wipe everything out, restore it from scratch, you will no longer be able to get the Nest integration because Google is shutting this down. At that point, I will then probably replace my Nest with something else. But until then, I'm going to keep my Nest because I kind of like it. Although I'm not using the Nest for all of its fanciness at the moment because I'm having Habitat control all of it. Then there's Rule Machine. So Rule Machine is all of the other rules that we have not talked about yet. So all of these are separate rules that control switches, lights, various other things. Sometimes it switches modes, and that's all controlled with Rule Machine. Okay. So that is the apps section. It's a little overwhelming at first, and we'll go through all of these, and I'm going to do kind of a day in the life of the smart home, which I had mentioned in my previous video about smart home hubs. And I'm going to show you how these rules work and what it's like to live with these rules day to day. Underneath that, there's settings. Not a place I spend a lot of my time. I'm mostly spending my time in the apps section and dashboards and devices, those top three. But there are things like location and modes is somewhere that I play around on a little bit. Checking for updates, backing up and restoring, and then here's how you can reboot your hub or shut it down. And these are Z-Wave and Zigbee controls here. I don't use those all that often, but I do want to show you location and modes, I think. So we'll hop on into location and modes. I'm going to hop right into the mode section here. Okay, so we're in the mode section. So up here it says the current mode. So modes are ways of turning things on and off. So I can say, for example, I've got this no bathroom motion over here. So at a certain point in the day, the mode switches to no bathroom motion. Okay, it's at night. It happens at actually it's triggered at this point by another rule, but somewhere between 8 and 9:30, a rule triggers and it turns my mode into no bathroom motion. So I've set it up so that my bathroom motion sensor does not work in my master bathroom during this mode. It's just because, towards the end of the day, I'm trying to wind down and I don't like to have bright lights. So there's enough light with my television and the dim light in my my bedroom to light the bathroom. So I don't have to worry about having the full lights in the bathroom kick on. So I have a home mode. So this is obviously for when I'm home. There's a night mode. So I have certain rules that can potentially fire depending on certain circumstances. And I've used the night mode to exclude those rules from firing. The away mode is very similar. So if I'm away from the house, it will shut off those rules from firing. Like things like my kitchen lights are set to go on in between 4:45 and 6 o'clock every day. But if I'm not home, that rule will not fire. So I'm not wasting electric and those lights don't go on. So I have a weird rule called arrival. This is what happens when I first arrive home from being away. And it's kind of an awkward way that I had to get some things to work. Not one that you'll probably have to worry about setting up, but it's there. Morning is another mode. This is kind of similar to the night mode and the no bathroom motion mode. I have this set up so in the morning, which is between 5 and 8 o'clock a.m., my bathroom motion sensors don't work. Again, there's enough light in the house where I don't have to worry about that. So that's how those modes work. Now, these modes are really kind of cool because they can be triggered by a rule or they can be triggered by a certain time of day. So I'm going to go back into apps for a second. And then we're going to hop on into the mode manager. Mode manager, you see that it says home. And that's because I'm home and it's during the day. So here you'll see that the home mode starts at 8 a.m. Okay, the morning mode starts at 5 a.m. Night mode starts at 11:30 p.m. And if I am away, these three modes will not change. So if I am away from the house and it happens to change to 8 o'clock in the morning, it will not switch to the home mode. The only thing that I have to make sure is that my away will eventually somehow switch it back to home mode, which it does. And the away is triggered by the presence of my cell phone using Life 360. You can set modes with buttons. You can also set modes with switches. You can also go into the rule manager, the rule machine, and set rules, set modes based on rules. So for example, I'll show you master pre-bed TV. So this rule you'll see, so here's what happens. So when the master bedroom sensor is active, okay, it's going to turn on the Apple TV. It's going to turn off all of these switches and bulbs and all that sort of stuff. It's going to activate that scene. That's that scene I mentioned earlier, the light that surrounds my television. And this tells it what color and what brightness it uses. And then if you look right here, mode. It sets the mode to no bathroom motion. Okay? So you can use a rule to change the mode as well, which is kind of neat. Which just shows you how powerful this can be. So the next thing I want to show you is I want to show you logs. So logs are just so helpful when you're going to create rules and they're not working the way you think they should work. The really neat thing about logs is that you can see past logs or you can see live logs. So what if you're looking at the screen now, you'll see that it says live log started waiting for events. So it's waiting for something to happen. So if I trigger, for example, my heater to go off, I'll trigger that. Here's something. This happens to be something with the Nest Learning thermostat. It kind of probes it to make sure that it's still connected. But let me show you what happens. I'm going to turn off my my heater in the basement. Alexa, turn off the heater. So you'll see that the basement heater was turned off. I don't know if you can hear it actually click off. So you'll see how that happens really quickly. That's the nature of a local solution. The cloud-based solutions don't happen nearly that quickly. So now I'll turn the heater back on. Alexa, turn on the heater. And it comes right back on. And the lag is actually more for the Amazon Alexa, which is connecting between the cloud and the Habitat. So there is that lag, but it actually happens a lot faster than that. The way the rules of the logs work, if you look up here at the top, you'll see that there's Nest event stream, and then there's basement heater. So now the basement heater is one of my devices. So if I want to see just the basement heater stuff, I can click on this and see just the basement heater. This is just the stuff that's live, okay? I can go back and see everything that's happened by going here and going show past logs. When I click on show past logs, the page is going to refresh, and it's going to start bringing up all of the logs for everything that's happened. I think it keeps logs back just a couple days, I think. So here are all of the logs that it has, and if you look down here, I mean, it goes quite a ways. I do have a lot of stuff happening, and a lot of the stuff you'll notice is this Nest event stream, which again is how Habitat make sure it has a communication back to the Nest Learning thermostat, which makes the logs a little bit cumbersome to use because a lot of it's that. But you'll notice that there's a lot more options up here. Okay, so if I want to see, for example, when the garage door was open, so I can hit the garage door. Okay, you'll see that it was closed at 2 o'clock. It was closed at 1:40. Master bedroom sensor. This will show you all the times that I've been inside of my master bedroom, and there was activity in that room. So all of those times for today are there. So this is really, really helpful for when you're trying to troubleshoot this sort of stuff. Knowing why things happen isn't always as obvious as you think. Sometimes rules trigger and they actually trigger something else sometimes, depending on how you have things set up. So being able to go in and check these logs to see what's happening and why it's happening is really, really neat and really, really helpful. So let's go through, let's create a rule inside of the rule machine, just so you can kind of see how robust this really is. So we'll load up the apps here, and let's go to rule machine. Okay, so here you have lots of options. There's create new rule, create custom commands, create or delete global variables, which is in beta. This is the user guide for Rule Machine, and if you want to remove Rule Machine from your Habitat, this is how you do that. If you do that, just keep in mind that all of your rules go with it. So just wave goodbye, make sure you have a backup before you do that. So we're going to go through, we're going to create a new rule. Okay, so this is where things start to get really confusing and overwhelming for some people, okay? So there are two basic kind of rules. There are more, I understand, but for the most part, there is a triggered rule and there is a rule based on certain conditions. Here's how I look at it. If you have a rule that is going to be triggered by one thing for the most part, like time or motion or something like that, a door opening, That is a triggered event. Okay. So it's one thing that is triggering something else. Okay. That would be when you'd use trigger. If you're using multiple things to create your rule, for example, let's say if you wanted to have it set so that at 4 o'clock your light goes on, but only if you're home, for example. Not a great example, but that's when you would use define a rule, because you have multiple conditions that have to be met in order for that rule to function. In the triggered event, it's just one thing that's triggering that thing to happen, like the push of a button, the opening of a door, motion in a certain area. That sort of thing is a trigger. But if you have multiple things to trigger a rule, or multiple conditions to be met before a rule will trigger, then you need to have a define rule. Okay, so we're going to define a trigger. So we'll hit define a trigger. First thing we'll do is name the trigger. This is just a name for the rule. And then we'll hit continue. If you wanted to change the name, you can go here and you can change it if you didn't like the name that you gave it, but we're going to leave it as test. So the next thing you have is select trigger events. So this is what is going to happen in order to cause this to happen. So if you go to select trigger events, click to set. You can set it if a battery gets too low. You can set it if a carbon monoxide detector gets off. You can set it for a certain time. Door opening or closing. There's so many different things that can trigger this to happen. Okay. So for this case, we're going to set it so it's going to be a certain time. And you can even have two triggers. In this case, we're going to have only one. So at a certain time, we're going to click to set, and we're going to set this for 2:28 p.m. And then we'll hit done. Okay. So this is saying, okay, at 2:28 p.m., this is going to happen. What's going to happen? Well, we're going to tell it what's going to happen. And that's where we go to select actions. So we go to actions. Inside of here, there are so many options. You can delay the action to happen. You can control switches. You can control dimmers and scenes. This is where you control colors of your Philips Hue light bulbs. You can control garage doors and thermostats. You can even send a message to your cell phone if you wanted to. This is for external commands for external services. You can send HTTP requests. This is where you can set your mode. You can have rules stop and run other rules from here. We're going to keep this very, very simple. So what we're going to do is we're going to control a switch. So we go to control switches. And we can either turn switches on, turn switches off, toggle them, which means if they're on, it will set them to off. But if they're off, they'll switch them to on. You can flash switches. So if you wanted to flash your lights for a certain thing, you could do that. You can turn them off after a delay. So you can turn them on and then have them go off after a certain amount of time. You can even set the switches per mode, which means if you're in your home mode, you can set it that the light will go on at 100%. But if you're at the nighttime mode, it'll only go to 50% if you want. So many options. It's so overwhelming, the amount of things that you can create. So in this case, we're going to set it to turn off these switches. So we hit click to set, and what it will do is it will preload all of my devices that I have in that device list view that I showed you before. So in this case, we're going to turn off my basement heater because it's right next to me. So we'll hit basement heater, and we'll hit update. Okay. And at this point, we're going to ignore all of this sort of stuff because it's just a little bit too much for what we're trying to do here. And then we'll hit done. Okay. We can add more things here. In this case, we're not going to. So we'll hit done again. So this is kind of a summary of what we've created. So here we have a name of a rule. It's called test. It's going to fire at 2:28 p.m. Off is what's going to happen. It's going to take the basement heater and turn it off. Okay. I can set restrictions so that it'll only happen between 2 times. Again, we're going to keep it simple for right now, but know that those options are there. So we're going to go to done. And when you hit done, it saves the rule. And then we're going to hopefully hop on into the logs quickly before 2:28 p.m. So you can see that it is 2:27 p.m. And in just a few seconds, we should have the basement heater go off. Let me see if I can see what time. Yep, we're about 10 seconds away. So in about 10 seconds, the basement heater should go off and the log should appear. There's that heartbeat. There we go. Basement heater was turned off at 2:28 p.m. Okay? All because of that rule that we just set up. So there is creating a rule in Habitat. Very simple, but very, very powerful. Alexa, turn on the heater. And there is the heater turned back on. So that is some real basic stuff about Habitat. I'm going to do some more videos about more advanced rules. There are certain rules that I have in my house that I have set up using Boolean values that are just so helpful. But I want to show you guys the day in the life of a smart home, so you guys can see what it's like to live with a smart home. Then I'll show you how to create some of the more advanced rules. This is a simple on-off rule that I showed you how to do, but it's still very powerful, still very, very helpful. So we're going to call it quits for today, guys. That is enough, I think. If you have any questions, please make sure you leave a comment below. I'll be happy to answer your questions. If you like this video, make sure you hit the thumbs up. And if you do like what we're doing here at KMM Tech, please make sure you subscribe. Hit that bell notification so you're notified when our new videos come out. We're trying to release a new video every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. So be sure you check back then. But make sure you hit that bell notification so that way you are notified by email when those new videos come out. That's it for today, guys. Hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next time.
Oakley dokley, everybody, thank you so much. Hey, all you cats and kittens out there, thanks for dealing with our technical issues that we seem to be suffering from. I'm Adam Kempenek. You might recognize me from the Habitat community, sporting a nice little bow tie. Who do we have live over the phone today? Tony, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, this is Tony Smith. I'm out of Fargo, North Dakota. Adam and I went to college together. Though he and I went and coded together in the college days, am a novice, and we'll kind of just be talking back and forth with Adam as we go.
Yeah, basically Tony and I went to college together. I'm very grateful to have him here with us live. He'll be fielding any questions. If you have questions, I would absolutely love to have you push them out into the chat. Tony can put them on the screen, and we'll be able to answer them as they come up. So, Tony, why don't you put up our fun little geezers graphic? I want to start with something that is a little more lighthearted, because during the thread that was in the Habitat forum, we had it kind of get hijacked. Will you give me the geezers graphic, Tony?
I did just put that live, yeah.
Oh, that's the coding one. The one
I'm sorry, you're right. They look exactly the same. Okay, there we go. My bad.
They look exactly the same, except one of them says something for the geezers. So, Ashok, you brought this up yesterday, and a few people had started going off about DOS prompts and how these old systems used to have to type into a command interface. And I was actually, at the recommendation of Steph Hack, requested to have the first tutorial be coding on a Commodore 64 basic prompt, a simple hello world. So I've got that ready here, and I'm just emulating this online, which is super cool to be able to emulate it. So we'll put in line 10, print, hello world. And the character set's a little different on here because on my keyboard, it's a US map, but the character encoding is different. So I have to hit Shift and 2 to get quotations, which is different from using the usual Shift and then the apostrophe key, which is right next to the return key. So
Is that a Commodore 64 thing, or is that an emulation thing?
You know, I'm not sure. I didn't check the character set. I just basically hit every key on the keyboard to figure out what it took to get a quotation.
Wise geezers in the chat, enlighten us if you can.
Why is geezers in the chat? I think it goes back to a time when Bruce or Chuck, somebody on the forums, relabeled a thread to say it was banter that these geezers had, and it was kind of a lighthearted comment, and he essentially took it, relabeled it, put it into a different section of the forum under the lounge, I think, because it got so far off topic. And I think it was actually about command prompts again, so that's kind of funny that it came full circle to that. So 10 print hello world, 20 end. Let's run that. Hello world. That's our first tutorial of the day. Thanks to Stefak for recommending that. That is something for the geezers. Now, let's get to the actual show today. We have a few very, very basic things. Basically, today I want to go over how to write an app from the ground up, how to write a driver from the ground up, and then we're going to turn that into a more full-fledged weather API. I want to take this all from a very, very basic standpoint. I'm not actually a developer by trade, which is kind of interesting. How do you describe what I do, Tony?
Technically, your position title is maker, I know. Basically, you work for a commercial production company, high-end commercial production company. You work with really nice equipment and do really high-quality work. But you just kind of tinker and do all the little things that they need done, whether it's technical, whether it's set design, whether it's video production, and you just kind of do it all and wear a lot of hats, I know.
Yeah, so I actually work at a company called Threefold. We're a commercial film production company based out of Bismarck, North Dakota, the heart of everywhere in the state. So we do a lot of traveling, do a lot of work around the state, around the U.S., and not so much traveling right now, obviously, with the current world situation. But yeah, so I'm not actually a developer by trade. So if you see me doing something that might not be by the book, I don't have a formal background. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them as best as I can. And I would love, again, to hear if you have any questions. So we're going to get started out actually, I want to give an update on something. I had said that I can do 3D prints. Tony had mentioned that I do 3D printing, and our printer is actually offline, so if anybody had requested any 3D prints on the forums, I wasn't able to get those out. The printer will be fixed Tuesday, and I'll be able to ship those out to you. So I just wanted to give a quick update on that.
Adam, quick thing from the chat. My volume is a lot higher than yours, apparently. If you wouldn't mind rebalancing that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let me pull you down here. And
Thank you, Wing.
yeah, thank you for pointing that out. And again, anything else that you notice here, I would love to make a point to get that fixed up. Thank you also for dealing with our technical difficulties, as this is our first stream. So, all right, what do you say we get started?
We're definitely experimenting here. We've got Discord chat feeding my audio. We've got your audio locally there. I'm remoted into your graphics computer, switching your graphics, but you're also running your own switching board for video.
Yeah, it's a little different when you can't be in the same room because of quarantine. It makes it a little bit more difficult.
It sounded like God speaking to Noah.
All right. Yeah, so let's get started. Basically, I'm on my home development hub here, and I want to start with just writing a basic primer app. And so I like to start every app by writing in the comments above, which is / and 2 asterisks, what the app's purpose is. This will be primer app. And
so
basically,
I'm a novice when it comes to Habitat.
Go ahead.
I bought a Habitat on sale at your direction. So this is just native in any Habitat, right? You can just code whatever you want.
Yeah. So basically, and we'll just go from the top here, on any hub, you greet it with your home screen. And on the left, you have your devices, apps, and settings. And then under advanced, you have the option for apps code or drivers code. As an example, I've written a Lightify bridge gateway. So that's not something that is included with the hub. It's not something that the Habitat team maintains. This is code that you will add onto your side of it, and it'll allow you to expand your hub to do things that aren't included out of the box. So you can also, as an example here, I've got a Magic Home light, and actually you can see it behind me right here. That is not something that is included with the hub. It's something that you install the code and then you can use these lights with the hub, but it's not maintained by the developers themselves. It's maintained by the community. In this case, it's an app or a driver that I've written. So it allows you to expand it. Now, writing something like an app would be useful if you wanted to, well, as an example, integrate a Lightify bridge. This app can communicate with the bridge itself and then go back and forth and communicate with the devices from the bridge. Or, as we'll see later, you could communicate with a weather integration. So we're gonna, like I said, go over and write an integration for world weather, because Brian from the community has already written a weather.gov implementation. So I'm not gonna tread over his work there. I changed my pace to work on a world weather integration. And at the end of the day, it'll probably be a pull request to merge with his code base. So let's get started writing a basic app. Basically, I want to write an app that will listen to a switch turning on or off, and then it will mirror that to another switch. So I'll create a virtual switch, and when I toggle that switch, it'll mirror its state to this device that's behind me, this bulb. So let's get writing that. Again, I like to, you click on apps, and you click on new app. I like to put a description at the top of what the app will do. So this will be a primer app.
And stupid question, what language is this?
This is Groovy, so it's Java-like and based off of Java from my understanding. But it is a little different. It's a little easier to write in than Java. So this app.
So if I remember my intro to computer science class, I should be pretty comfortable and familiar with this.
Oh, totally, yeah. Yep.
I don't remember any of that, so I won't be, but just kind of clarifying that.
Yeah, no, that's, and Google is your friend with all of this. You'll see that I don't have a lot of this memorized. And so a great resource that you can go to is actually, funny enough, the Smartthings developer documentation. And I just, I Google that every time I need to find it. Smartthings documentation, and you'll see the classic documentation right here, because Habitat and Smartthings actually very closely mirror each other as far as architecture goes. So, Tony, it seems like you're a little quiet now. And somebody says you're like...
Sounds like it.
There, I'll
boost me up just a tad. Somewhere in the middle. We got to Goldilocks it.
That's our friend Tony, and he likes to whisper.
All right, so hopefully it's better now. Let's see. All right. So let's go back to the Smartthings developer documentation. And you can see there's getting started section. They even have a writing your own smart app ready to dive in. You can follow that tutorial, which is basically what we're doing now. But if you have any questions about what you can do, what the limitations are of what you can do, this is a great place to look at. There's also the Habitat documentation. Tony, do you want to put up the lower third with the Habitat documentation link?
Yeah.
That's docs.habitat.com. And those, everything that you can do
here we go.
is on this page. So let's see. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, you have developer documentation, and this again shows you what you can do. But going between the Smartthings developer documentation and the Habitat documentation will get you pretty much everything that you need to do to start an app. So I will go into the Smart App section here, and basically I want to look at getting started with an app. So let's actually take a look at the anatomy here. So it breaks down pretty well how an app is structured. So you have your metadata. This just defines what the app is all about. You have your preferences. This is where, as a user, you can go and change your settings. You can say, when this switch turns on, I want to do this. And basically that looks at a list of capabilities, and it lets you change what devices you're selecting or what attributes you're selecting. And then below that, you have all of your app methods that handle basically everything that happens. So you pretty much always want to have installed, updated, and initialize. Those are all called at different times. So every time you install the app, it'll run this. And when you update the app, when you hit done in the settings, it'll run this. And then
Looks almost easier to set up methods than it was in Java. So
oh yeah, totally, because you can simply declare them. And I don't know if this is for certain, but I think that each app essentially acts as a class of its own. But I don't actually have any confirmation on that. So I'm going to start. We're just going to basically write up this definition section. So we start with definition and open parenthesis. We're going to give it a name. This would be our primer app. Namespace, which is just where the app's name operates. So we're going to call this demonstration. And we've got the author of the app, in this case, it's me. And a description. Let's write an app. And then under category, in this case, and again, this entire list is available under the Smartthings documentation, and there's also a list under the Habitat documentation, if I'm not mistaken. Our category would be convenience. And, whoops, include a comma. We have icon URLs, which Habitat doesn't use, Smartthings does. I'm going to leave these blank. Icon x2 URL. Then you have an x3 URL. We'll leave those blank. And wrap our parentheses out. Yep, that matches. And then we've got our device settings, excuse me. So we'll give it a preferences page. Preferences, okay, I spelled that correctly. We'll open brace here. And so I'm going to declare a page, essentially. I'm going to say, when the preferences load, I want to look at this dynamic page, which will be defined later. But the page that I'm going to load is called child. Oh, I don't want to call it child setup. I'm so used to writing parent and child devices that by default just called it child device. So we're actually going to call it setup. And that'll be our child device method that it'll look for the preferences page. So we can close out of preferences. So we've closed out of definition and our preferences. We're good there. And right away, I'm going to define that setup method that we talked about so that it knows where to look for the preferences. So def setup. No parameters will be passed through to that. And essentially, I'm going to call this a dynamic page. I could just do a very basic page. Smartthings actually does that in their documentation. I'm not going to do it here. I think it is better to just get started with a dynamic page. You don't have to add more pages, but this is a good way to have a foundation set up so that if you want to start adding more pages later, you already have the groundwork done. You can add more methods, you can add more pages, and you don't have to worry about changing the whole infrastructure of your app. So I'm going to write it with dynamic pages, just getting started out here, and I think that'll be easier for people to maintain going on. And you can actually find the documentation here at the link right here, docs.habitat.com. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see developer documentation. You can click on that, and that'll show you the list of other things. The other page you can go to is docs.smartthings.com, and that will have all of the documentation for Smartthings, so you can kind of work back and forth and fill in the gaps in the documentation where need be. So let's get back to the app here. We're calling our setup method, and I'm going to write a dynamic page.
So is setup like main in Groovy World?
Not really. Maybe. Man, if I were to say what main would be like in this, it would probably be installed, because that's the first thing that's called when an app is installed, and that'll call dependencies. So essentially, every time that you load an app, it'll either run installed or it'll run updated if you just hit saved in your preferences. So either one of those two might be more like main if you were to draw a direct comparison there, just because that's the top-down hierarchy that it'll call from. So we've got our dynamic page. I'm going to give it a name. I'll call it, I almost called it child setup again. So I'm just going to call it setup. Title, give it a title that it'll display on the top of the page. Primer app. Close out that. Next page. Null. So I'm actually going to put all this code on GitHub too. So anybody who wants to use it, you can go to my GitHub, which is, if you search for Adam Kempenek, you'll find it. And I'll post it to the live link for this stream as well in the Habitat forums. And so essentially I just declared that this is the page that's shown when you install it, and when you can also uninstall the app from this page, so it'll have a remove button in the corner. And then refresh interval. I don't know if this one is declared with a default value or not, but a refresh interval will be 0 just in case it is not declared by default. All right, so we've got a page written, and under each page we are going to have different sections. So in this case, I'm just going to declare a section. You can put a title in this section, and it'll display it. And under that, you can have your separate inputs. So I'm going to have a trigger switch, and then I'm going to have an output switch that it'll essentially turn on and off every time that this gets called. So that's the basic setup. We're going to have a switch that, when we turn it on and off, will mirror the output to another device. So our input switch is going to be a trigger switch, is what I'm going to call it.
So what's the practical application for something this simple, Adam? If I were to start home automating my tiny efficiency apartment, what would I be able to do this with? Or what would be the practical application of this?
You know, that's a great question, Tony. So a good example of that would be if you have, let's say, a contact sensor. And if you wanted to write an app where you open, say, a closet door, and you want to have a light that will turn on, you could very easily modify this code, and it could say, instead of capability.switch, you could say capability.contact. And then if your contact switches to open, you want a light to turn on. And if it switches to close, then you'd want the light to turn off. So essentially, this app can be used to very quickly write your own app to change the behavior of different devices if you don't want to use Rule Machine.
And if you don't want to use the pre-canned stuff that's built into Habitat.
Yeah, exactly. And Rule Machine is great, but it might sometimes be easier or cleaner to write your own applications, and maybe you'll even get a speed boost out of that. But Rule Machine is very advanced, but this is very advanced because you can make way more use cases and get it as specific as you want. So a good example would be is that I want an app that would do contact and motion lighting. Out of the box in Habitat, you only get motion lighting. So that would be something where I'd be able to write my own app and very quickly change it without having to make a bunch of rules that can get messy really quickly and become kind of hard to manage. So that's a more specific use case. Yep. And I wanted to go down to the capability list. This is under docs.habitat.com. And if you click on developer documentation, it's all the way at the bottom. I'm going to look for switch. So this is where you see capability.switch, and it'll show you what our responses are going to be for if you turn a device on or off. It'll let you see exactly what you're looking for and what the device will respond with when you do that. So let's see. So yeah, I'm going to be looking for our input, and I want it to be capability.switch. Again, I pulled that from the Habitat driver capabilities list, and you can also find that under the Smartthings list. I like to find it under the Habitat side. Oh no, I just closed the tab. I'm going to have to start over, aren't I? Yes, I will. That's embarrassing. Primer app. Well, yeah, so does anybody have any questions right now? I'd be happy to take a look at them as I rewrite this. What do you
I haven't
think?
gotten a ton.
Tony, I remember a story about Joseph Latimer, one of our college professors. And we've been out of college for, oh man, years now. But what did he have to say about DOS and Unix? That's kind of a funny thing.
So he's an old school Windows guy, but he said in college he was always friends with old school Linux guy, or Unix guys, I should say. And he said he outlived them all, so that was proof that DOS was the superior operating system in those days, or that Windows is the superior operating system. Not sure what his logic on that was, but if you can just imagine a really old Southern grandpa who was also really good at computer science, that's who Joseph Latimer was.
Joseph, if you're for some reason tuned into our stream today, you did teach us a lot, and I guess he did outlive everybody, which is...
He was one of my favorite computer science instructors. He took things very... He was very easygoing. You could definitely tell he was getting ready to retire, or that he just didn't really care to retire ever, and that they weren't going to ever kick him out. Because he was just like... Let's see, the video from your monitor is unreadable in my system.
Too small, maybe? Here, we'll make it bigger.
Yeah, very blurry. I'm guessing when the final version gets uploaded, it'll be a lot higher quality, but yeah, while we're going live, it's probably not going to be as high quality.
Yeah. So maybe, and I just got a notification that somebody unlocked the front door, so I want to say you might hear some barking in the background. We have a few spunky dogs, and I'm
Those Shibas.
They're Shiba Inus. They're very spunky, and they're from Nebraska. So they're Nebraskan dogs. I'm just basically going through and undoing the mistake that I made when I closed out that. I wanted to close this tab, actually. So we're giving it a title again. This will be Primer app. And next page. Well, install true. Uninstall true. Refresh, interval 0. And this will be our settings page. So we have our section. And we'll just give it a section 1, which is probably better than the hello that I had thrown in there earlier. And that's essentially just going to display at the top of the page. I'm going to add a few extra lines so we're not at the bottom. Yeah, so now I'm going to redeclare that input. So we're going to have input, trigger, switch, capability, switch. And if I'm not mistaken, yeah, down later on below, you can essentially, when you're calling this, say, well, I only want to call this when the switch turns on, or I only want to call it when the switch turns off. But we'll declare that later. Title. Which switch will trigger other lights. And I only want one switch to appear in this list. So I'm going to say multiple false and required true. So you won't be able to save the app, or you won't be able to save the settings until this is called, or until it's set up properly. So that's our trigger switch. We've got that all configured. I'm going to do the same thing with our action switch. Again, we want to have a setup where we can call it trigger, and then we want to have it actuate actually other devices. So that's basically what we're setting up right now. So we've got our trigger switch set up, and now we're calling an action switch. And again, this will be devices that have the capability switch. You can find those capabilities on the Habitat Documents page and our title. So essentially we're doing the same thing up here, but we're just going to handle the devices differently down below when we actually write our methods. So our input action, switch, and mirror the behavior from above to these devices. So I'm going to do something different this time. I'm going to have multiple devices true, because I want to be able to say select more than one device. I'm going to required true, because this app wouldn't do much. Oh, look at me. There we go. Mess up our input. Can everybody see it a little bit better now? Looks like it's better.
General feedback from the chat is that yes, it's a lot better now.
Perfect. All right. Sorry about the hiccup with that then. I set all of my normal screens to be really small, because then you can just see everything at once. So thank you for letting me know. And we have our input set up now. So something else that's really cool is that you can actually change the title of an app pretty easily. You just put label title, and this will let you change the name of this app. So you could call it whatever you want. You don't have to leave it called primer app. This is useful for if you have like 5 or 6 apps that do the same thing. Normally you'd use like a child app, but this would let you have multiple apps and essentially relabel them to be different for each app. So you could have one that says toggle upstairs lights when this switch turns on, or you could say turn on the library light when this virtual switch turns on. So that just lets you change it organizationally. It won't actually have an input or an effect on the app itself. It's just for your own organization. So we have our section closed out here. We're going to close out our page, and then we're going to close out this method. And now I'm going to essentially call for installed. Oh, better define it first. So I'm going to call installed, no parameters with installed. I'm going to put this to the logs, because I want to essentially know when something comes through. So this is log debug installed application. We're going to unsubscribe from any events that this is already subscribed to. So essentially, where you see input trigger and input action switch, we're going to subscribe to events so that when something happens to those, the app knows, oh, I should listen for this, and then I should do something with this. When we say unsubscribe, it tells the app to stop listening for that, and it will ignore events from that point on, which will clean it up because we're about to redeclare it. So when we install it, we're going to unsubscribe, we're going to unschedule, and then we're going to call our initialize method. Basically,
and then Adam, just to clear something up that came up in the chat, it sounds like the answer is yes, you're going to, but you're going to throw this up on GitHub, right?
Absolutely, yes. All of this, both the primer app and the primer driver, will be available on GitHub after we're done. For our installed method, I basically want the updated method to do the same thing. I want to start ignoring everything. Sometimes it's wise to put this right into your initialization method, but right now we're not going to do that.
So when I think installed, when I'm looking at methods or things like that, I'm thinking like an actual installer. That's not what this is when we're talking about Habitat, right?
Nope, install is when you go to your apps page and you go to the little plus button that says add user app. It'll show up here, and when you click on it, it'll call the installed method when you finish going through that first page.
So, and this is just me being nitpicky or me being, a novice with computer science. Why is it installed and not install? When I think about computer science, I've always been told with methods they should be action words. So why is it not install to complete that method, and why is it installed with ed at the end?
You know, I don't have a definitive answer on that. I think that's a good question. I would presume that it's called installed because it's called after the installation runs, after you go through the initial setup of the app itself and click done. That would be my guess, but I think that might just honestly go back to the Smartthings legacy, just how they decided to call it, because this is, again, based off of the Smartthings development documentation.
Gotcha.
So we've
So old leftovers from Samsung's days?
kinda. Yep.
Okay.
And that's these are obviously very interchangeable between Smartthings and Habitat as far as methods and everything goes, because they're both based off of Groovy. So essentially, I'm gonna log an info. You noticed earlier I wrote log.debug. Right here, I'm writing log.info. There are several different levels. There's log.trace, .error, .info, .debug, and there's one more that's not coming to me off the top of my head. But I want to call this just as a general information point. I'm going to say that it's initializing with settings. And something cool is that you can inject variables, or you can do code inside of your strings in Groovy. So that's what this $ and then open bracket here calls. And I'm going to just put our entire settings into it from above. So it's actually going to write to the log, it'll say initializing the settings, and then it'll show which settings we've selected. And that'll write to the logs. And then I'm going to subscribe. Oh boy. So earlier I said that you can subscribe to devices. I'm going to subscribe to our trigger switch. And here's where you can write switch. And you can say, I want to call switches when they turn on, or I want to call switches when they turn off. Or in this case, I just want to call switches when they turn on or off. And when they do turn on or off, I want to call this handler. So I'm going to call it event handler. Which was
so another novice question for you, Adam. Subscribe is basically saying, hey, listen to this device, and unsubscribe is saying, hey, stop listening to this device. You don't care about it anymore.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so unsubscribe, if I were to say unsubscribe now, it would stop listening for anything that we have called here. And right now, it's going to take all of the devices that we have assigned in our settings. It'll say when the switch event happens, call event handler. So that's actually all we need to do for initialize. And now we can get on to writing event handler. Ooh.
You know what I already like about Groovy that I'm noticing that's different from Java?
What's
the
that?
lack of semicolons.
Yes,
there's nothing like hunting down that missing semicolon.
So people watching might have noticed I like to, every time I write a method, make sure that I have closed everything up properly. In this case, I forgot to add the other end parenthesis here, and I noticed that this was red, meaning that it couldn't find a matching bracket, or is that a brace? But when I found out what I was missing, it turned back green, and I know, okay, that method's closed up, so I can go on to the next one. And this event will actually be our event handler, which we called right here. So we want event handler. We're going to call EVT will be what it's going to call. So anything that's passed through to this will be declared in this variable, which is called EVT. And we're going to log this into our debugs. We're going to say switch was turned. We're going to call some code, evt.value. This is just from experience, I know to call evt.value. but it'll essentially take the value of whatever is passed through to our event handler, and it'll log that. If we were to just log event, it would just literally log the event name, so we don't want to do that. So we're going to say if event.value equals on, then for each device in our action switch, the settings.action switch. So we've essentially just gone through the array of all of our switches, and we've said for each time, or for each different device, we're going to run this. So we're going to say device.on, and that'll run the on method for the device. And if we don't receive an on command, I should close that up. There we go. I want to do the same thing, but I want to turn the device off. So we've wrapped that, and now we can actually wrap our event handler method. I'm going to save this. I did that too quickly and called them both the same thing. But essentially, we just saved it, and now we can go and use this app. So before we do that, I'm going to open our logs, and I'm going to put that side by side. So we'll be able to see the logs live as they come through and as we install this app. So I've saved that app code, and I am now going to add a user app. I better refresh this page. Add a user app, a primer app. Look at that. That's perfect. An unexpected error, and this is great. I'm actually glad that I definitely typed something wrong in there. So it says, no signature of method, user app demonstration, primer app 91.setup is available for argument. And setup might actually be taken, so we might have to call it app setup. And that might be the issue that we were facing.
So now you get to have the fun of looking through your code.
Exactly.
Can't make it look too easy.
Yep, and now we've just got a general error. All right. An unexpected error. So I definitely did something silly. So let's see. No signature of method app is available for, oh, okay. So it doesn't like that I'm not calling parameters somewhere, it looks like. Well, that's great. So I was calling for setup, and I did it out of habit again. I called it child setup. Really, I should have called it app setup. So it was confused as can be, looking for a page that didn't exist. And now that we fixed it, I'm going to go back, add a user app, primer app, fingers crossed. There it is. So this primer app is the app
Brian
title.
wants to know, is child setup function that needs to be controlled? Is it the function that needs to be called?
It would be the one that needs to be called, yeah. I mislabeled it. I should have called it app setup because that's what I had declared, or originally I just called it setup. And basically you saw the debug process of what I went through to go through my method of figuring out what I needed to debug. So we have our primer app, that's the app's name. That's what we are declaring in the dynamic pages title. We see section 1 as we're declaring our section. That's seen right here. And we have our input and our output, which we declared right here. So our input, our trigger switch, and our action switch. So I'm going to actually, so we're going to start over. Make a new primer app. Okay. So I only have this light that's behind me. This is the upstairs live. I actually have to go and create a virtual switch that we can use as a trigger. So we're going to go into devices. Just for this example, I'm going to add a virtual device. I'm going to call it trigger switch. Type will be virtual switch. I'm going to hit save. So this is our trigger switch. You can just turn it on or off. And I'm going to go back into our apps. I'm going to add our app again, primer app. And now we have our trigger switch as a switch that can trigger other lights. And I'm going to mirror the behavior to my piano light, which is right here. I'm going to hit
Adam,
done.
I think we're having a little bit of trouble with the stream. I was losing some connectivity. I thought it was because my girlfriend was streaming something herself, but it looks like Wing is saying that we're having a little bit of trouble with the stream as well.
Okay.
Can you take a look at the encoding?
Yeah, certainly. It's not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. Okay. Well, let's, actually, YouTube isn't going to let me change that right now. For the parts that are a little jittery, after the stream is uploaded, or after it's over, I will make sure that it's re-uploaded, and it should play back smoothly then, just because I do have a recording of it, and hopefully it comes back smoothly. I'm sorry for all the stuttering that we've been experiencing. I'll make sure that we get it faxed out for episode 2 here.
We're getting mixed results, and I do happen to know my bandwidth is being cut right now, so
Okay.
we might just be dealing with some people hogging some internet.
Yeah, I mean, it could also be, I'm sure that everybody right about now in our city is trying to start watching their stream, so maybe it's on my end as well. I would not doubt that at all. Again, sorry for the streaming interruptions. If you have been experiencing that, I will upload this after it's done, and we'll be able to watch it with smooth playback then. So we've got our primer app written, and I went and I hit save. And then that's where it ran that installed method, Tony. So labeled something improperly. And that would be right here where I only put setting and not settings, because I was feeling a little goofy. So if we call that, there we go, no error. Always double check what you write. And now if we call this, it'll turn the switch on and off. So I'm going to give you a live demonstration of that right here. I'm hitting on, and that's going through the app and turning it on. And then if we hit off, it'll turn it off. So I'm going to actually switch to V1 here. I'm going to change our V1 background. Bear with me as I get this set up so that you can all see it. There we go. So I'm going to hit on, and you can see it come on behind me. I'll hit off, and it turns off.
Can't hear that nice screech from Adam's class.
From my desk? Whoops.
Yes.
Whoops-a-daisy. So that's a basic app, and that's about as simple as you can get. It's just saying, hey, listen for this event, and then it calls a different action when it listens for that event. Again, I will upload this to GitHub, and we'll be able to use that to write more apps. So essentially, you can look through the documentation, and you can try different subscriptions. You could subscribe to a contact switch, or say a temperature, and you could say, well, when the temperature reaches, 86 or whatever, then I want to turn on the air conditioning, because 86 Fahrenheit would be very warm, and 86 centigrade would be even worse. You'd be dang near boiling alive, and obviously at that point you'd want some air conditioning. I think you would, at least. So we've written the primer app, and now let's do the same thing with a driver. I'm going to close our logs here, and I've got all of my, this is my development hub again, so you can see that I was working on Lightify lately. A device or a driver is going to be pretty much the same as far as metadata goes. There's a little bit of different terminology that you have to use, a little bit of a different structure with a primer or with a device driver. So I'm going to call this primer device. And again, we're going to go metadata. We're going to say definition. And a good way to make sure you get this right is Habitat has a really sweet GitHub repository, and it actually has a bunch of example drivers, and it's got a few, and they're a little bit more advanced, but it's got a few example drivers, and I think there might even be an app or two in there too that you can take a look at. Otherwise, different community repositories, BPT World, Brian has a really great repository that makes it super easy to learn from. Just make sure that you follow code attribution if you are borrowing people's code. It's not fun to steal people's work. So we're going to name this a primer device type. Namespace again, this will just be development. Author, that's me. Import URL, which is something that I like to put in here. So this is if you have something from GitHub, you can pull an import URL and you can hit this import button and it'll actually pull the code live from GitHub, and it'll essentially give you an easy update option for people that are using your code base. So when I say to people, you can go ahead and update your Magic Home driver, essentially what I'm telling them to do is go into this driver and hit the import button and then hit save or done, and it'll save your code from the latest push that I made to GitHub. There's also like a documentation URL and I think a video URL as well. Those have been added as far as, I think it was 2.19, the Habitat release, that added those two. But I'm not 100% sure. So if you have like a video, you can also add that in as a demonstration, or documentation. They'll appear in the corner of an app or a device so that people can more easily take a look at that and get help. So